So please welcome RJ Spina to the show. Welcome, RJ.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Oh, you know, I told you before we hit record that when I found you, I just was like, I need to find a way to get him on this show. And that was just what, a month ago. And I've read your book, the new book, Change Your Mind. And when I'm reading it, I'm resonating because that's how the words that we speak in this house as a mom to my kids, how I've raised them is exactly what you believe in the spell, and I just loved it. So I can really connected to you and what your message is and what you're teaching. But then I go deeper, and I'm known to go down the rabbit hole.
Mhm.
And I just kept going, and I thought, oh my gosh, I felt like I was remembering you. And I feel like when you meet your new teacher or you meet a mentor that really speaks to you and like it resonates with your soul, that was you with me. And it's been this ongoing thing. I've been looking at you on Zoom right now. I feel like, is it really you talking to me, or is it a video that I've been watching? Because I've had you in my mind, in my ear. I have the Audible book. But what I'd like to do, RJ, is because my listeners might not know your amazing story. I'd love to go. I always say, like, the name of my podcast is Uncover Your Magic, and we all have magic. And I love yours because yours ends with a K. Um, I feel like when you were little, I'd like to start like when you say you're around 4 years old, when you started to realize you had these gifts, because I feel like that kind of starts the journey of where you got to, and that's when everything starts to unfold. Can we start there just so people get the gist of why I think you're like this amazing soul to me?
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, of course we can start there. Yeah. So I always had the feeling that I was here for, we'll say, a special purpose. I always felt that way. And I always felt very, very removed from this experience, even though I had projected myself into this reality. And that really is how it felt as a kid. That hasn't changed, by the way. That really felt how I felt as a kid. I even would share things like that with my mother more than anyone else. But I discovered very early on, I would almost say by accident, that I had a propensity to leave my body and to be able to explore. And my earliest memories actually are of leaving my body.
Hmm.
So, and I certainly wasn't taught or trained or anything like that in this life to do that. But I would just relax. I'd lie down in bed or I would sit in a chair. And as I was getting closer and closer to just total serenity, total peace, all of a sudden my consciousness or my sentience was outside of my body. And this started happening literally every single day. I'd be standing next to my body, looking at my body, or I'd be on the ceiling looking down at my body. And this was totally regular. And in the beginning, as a little kid, in the beginning, probably because I was a little kid, I assumed I couldn't leave my parents' house, even though I was
Oh,
removed from
funny.
my body. But I started to realize, I remember one time I left my body and then I was on the roof.
Hmm.
So then all of a sudden I was like, oh, well, maybe there's no limitation to what I can do. And then I realized just through intention, my consciousness or sentience or the I am would go anywhere and it would do it immediately. It's almost instantaneous and you're there. And one of the things I also used to do as a kid is that I would be able to project my consciousness uh, as if I was microscopic, and I would project myself into the backyard. I loved the backyard. We had this big lawn. And so
Mm-hmm.
I would project my consciousness as if I was like the size of an ant. And I'd be able to literally walk in between the blades of
Huh.
grass. And uh, this, of course, was exciting and enthralling and all that kind of stuff. But then I also realized that I could go into outer space. And I started traveling. What I now understand are different frequencies, realities, and dimensions, different timelines as well. And so I would just do this as a kid, naturally, every day, multiple times a day. And I really thought it was universal, believe it or not, until I asked my mom, where do you go
Mhm.
when you go to sleep. And she's like, don't even remember anything. What do you mean, where do I go? Well, you interact with. What advanced star systems do you go to, and what information do you come back with? And so she just looked at me, what are you talking about? And it was only in that moment that I realized that it was unusual. I literally thought it was universal. I mean, it was common for me, but that's how it started. And I even used to say as a kid that if I ever get sick, I'll just heal myself, which is a weird thing to say, but obviously I was remembering what was going to happen. So and that wound up, as you know, wound up becoming the information for the first book, Supercharged Self-Healing. But the childhood, other than me leaving my body all the time and being able to understand what we would call deep esoteric wisdom and even metaphysics as a kid, it makes more sense now that I have a better understanding as to why I am the way that I am. But that was my childhood, traveling outside of my body and interacting with advanced beings and projecting my consciousness into the lawn and having all these kind of strange experiences.
What kind of friends did you have? Like, or were you just kind of on your own?
I was very into sports when I was young. I think on the outside, I had normal friends. I behaved
Hmm.
normal. And some of these things, once my mom told me how unusual it was, for the most part, I didn't stop doing it. I just kept it to myself because then I realized that it was uncommon and there really wouldn't be any way to communicate with someone unless they were having those experiences. But even though I was keeping it to myself, I was always acutely aware that I was here for a very special reason and that I had a mission that needed to be accomplished. And quite frankly, I always felt and still do that it is a unique mission that I signed myself up for. That, dare I say, I'm the only one that is supposed to do this or can do this in this way. And of course, that made more sense as I became an adult and became permanently paralyzed and healed myself. But I still feel that way, and I still feel that it's a joy, it's an honor, it's a privilege, and it's my responsibility to be able to relay these teachings and these understandings to humanity.
You've done past life. You used to do past life regressions with people, and you don't do that anymore. In your experience with your past lives, were you a healer and all? Do you go back to that?
I share some of my past lives in the self-mastery class. The past life readings that I used to do for people, when I turned 24, I had a profound experience in terms of my third eye remaining open whenever it is that I needed it. And I would be able to look into people's incarnations, previous incarnations, future incarnations, which are all happening now. And so I used to give, excuse me, past life readings to people. And then I stopped actually because I realized that my purpose of doing it was to liberate them, to free their consciousness from identifications, to
Mm-hmm.
reach self-realization. And I used to be deluded enough into thinking that that's what everyone wanted. Everyone wanted self-realization, enlightenment, and complete liberation. I quickly found out that by giving past life readings that people were adopting more and more identifications to these other incarnations, which is only increasing their personhood or what I call their ego mind identity. So I wound up doing the opposite in terms of what my intention was, which was liberation. So I stopped doing it. And one thing I've never shared before, which I'll share right now, there
Okay.
was a gentleman who was instrumental in helping me at that age for a couple of years. He's still the best medium that I've ever encountered. I don't think it's even close. He recently left his body, but he's very, very private, never made a big deal about any of his abilities, but his abilities are more profound as a medium than anyone I ever met. And when I stopped doing the past life readings, he had a friend that was a state trooper, and this was in upstate New York. And this person would come over and relay things that were going on at work, and sometimes it was crimes or things like that. So very quietly, myself and my friend Rich would help them solve unsolved cases in
Hmm.
terms of you should look into this person, or you should look into that
Oh,
person.
wow.
And we did that for a few years, kept it quiet, but it also helped me hone my skills in terms of being able to tap into things with limited information and be able to be very specific. And then I've been able to, I would say, build upon that over the last 20 years. But that is something that I did for a couple of years. I've never talked about it until now.
Wow. First time. So let's go into the when you turned April 16th, 2016. April 23rd, sorry, 2016. When were you 45 then?
That sounds right. That sounds right. Yeah.
Okay. But you know, like when we get to this day and people understand like your journey of remembering and knowing that you just knew, you had this knowing, and there's such a thing about knowing, and I love that. And when you get to this moment in April, and I mean, when you think of 2016, you know, that's not long ago. You know, it's amazing. So let's go. Take us
Yeah,
there.
sure. So April 23rd, 2016. April 23rd is Shakespeare's birthday, by the way.
Oh, huh.
Shakespeare is a fictional person. All those plays were written by Francis Bacon. But that's a whole nother conversation. So April 23rd, 2016, I became permanently paralyzed from the chest down. I was told I had 48 hours to live. I had severe sepsis. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, severe autoimmune disease, pancreatitis, thyroiditis, a retracted heart. I was told to make out a will right away. I would never make it, till the weekend. And I was also suffering from something called autonomic dysreflexia, and paraplegics and quadriplegics who have their injury above T6, and mine was T7 and T8. An injury to that part of your spine can often cause your autonomic system to completely shut down and run haywire. So things like your breathing, body temperature, pulse, heart rate were no longer automatically regulated. And
Oh,
paraplegics and quadriplegics often die from complications. You could have a stroke, an aneurysm, go into a coma. So that was going on. All that was going on at the same time. So I had emergency surgery, and they did something called a laminectomy, where they scraped the infection off my spine. But I was already paralyzed, and the prognosis was that because the spine had been damaged, there was no way to get better, to repair, and that was sort of the end of that. But when I woke up from surgery, the truth of the matter is I woke up into authentic cosmic consciousness, what's actually even beyond enlightenment. And I started telling the ICU nurse the higher consciousness, enlightened metaphysics of self-healing and self-realization, sort of explaining it to her. It's like it all came back to me. Like when I woke up, when I used to say as a kid, if I ever get sick, I'll just heal myself. I knew that I knew, but I didn't know the specifics.
mm-hmm.
When I woke up from surgery, I knew the specifics like I knew at the back of my hand. And I started explaining to her what I was going to do, how it works, energetic templates, channeling intelligent energy, the deconstruction of the false self, et cetera, and then I said, in 100 days, I will walk out of here unassisted, and I'll be completely healed of everything that's going on with me. Now, it was too specific for her to dismiss it as I was just high from the anesthesia.
Right.
It was way too specific. And I remember her looking at me, and she just says, "How do you know this?" And I just said, "I remember. I absolutely remember." So it took essentially the complete destruction of my body for the remembering, the knowingness that was buried deep within me to come to the surface, and to give myself this great challenge to be able to put myself back together again, and then be able to offer up the teachings to humanity. But without that challenge, without that great challenge that I gave myself, because we give all of ourselves our challenges with our health.
Right.
Without that challenge, I don't think the remembering would have happened. But when it did happen, it all came right back online.
Oh, amazing. You know, so you get to the 100th day, you proved it, you were healed. And there's videos on your website that show that you were making sure it was all noted and videoed, so everyone saw this miracle. But when you say we all plan our health issues, and will you explain how you see life before? Because you know what I love about what you say is like, we only want to come here once. This is like the earth. Like we only want to come here one and get it done. But we keep repeating. You had another example of staring at a statue and how long that takes when you're staring at a statue, and then you have to go from the front of it. Will you explain that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The point of incarnation is to not incarnate again.
Right.
Okay. It's not to repeat, second grade over and over and over again. It's to get it right, and we move on to something else. So to come back to your first question, Ashley, about health. So before we reincarnate, we have a complete and total understanding of the genetic entity, of the physical body. I call it the genetic entity of the physical body that we're going to incarnate into. We know everything about it. We can actually see the entire hereditary line of every incarnate aspect that ever used that body all the way through. So when we incarnate, this is actually our ancestors. And of course, all of their thought patterns, all of their emotional patterns, all of their societal conditioning, all of their traumatic experiences are embedded within the genetic entity. So we literally incarnate into our ancestors, but we have a complete, clear, holographic blueprint of this before we get here. So we know if, like we say, oh, I'm genetically predisposed to cancer, or I'm genetically predisposed to, yeah, you knew that before you got here. Because when we wake up, and I mean really wake up, when we wake up and we develop the ability to heal ourselves, we actually heal the entire ancestral line at the same time. Okay. So this is very important to understand this. So no one is ever a victim to whatever genetics that they have, because the active incarnate aspect, the I am, the soul that occupies that physical vehicle, when it gains full dominion over the body-mind complex, you could call that self-realization or enlightenment, or whatever word you want to use. But when it gains full dominion over the body-mind complex, it doesn't matter what the genetics are, because genetics are changed moment to moment,
right,
based upon your concept of yourself. Whatever conceptualized reality you create for yourself, the body has the tangible experience of that. So that's the mind-body connection in one sentence. So once we start to take command of the incarnation of the mind-body, it's irrelevant what genetics are. Genetics, from my perspective, from my bizarre perspective, is nothing. It's absolutely nothing. It is your higher mind that creates everything. And once you start to use your higher mind, you can transcend any lower consciousness physicality. And the first book explains that in great detail, and exactly how to do it.
right. The seven steps, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. When you talk about the higher mind, and like all I see, what I see in you, RJ, in that human body is only 30% of what you truly are. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Right. So most of what we are is beyond physical sensory perception. So if we could see each other clearly with the third eye, I guess we could say, we would see a much larger being, and we would see a much deeper aspect of what we actually are. Our genetic entity, our physical body, its 5 physical senses are only attuned to a very narrow bandwidth, and the physical body itself is attuned to and part of just the local environment.
Side of life with your host.
Sorry.
That's okay.
All right. Little interruption there. But anyway, so let's talk about, so you started this healing journey when you told yourself, told everyone in 100 days, I'm going to heal myself. And now that I understand your first book, the 7 steps, and what you did, and you've laid it all out, I want you to understand, I want people to understand the thinking, the way you describe, healing, the I am, everything after the I am is, it's belief. Talk about all, because I love getting rid of these limiting beliefs and proving it wrong, and doing your journaling exercise, and spending every day, when you talk about, you walked by the mirror and you saw your hair and it was messy. Why does that bug, who is that? So will you explain? Because I think people, I'm a mom, and I am a teacher for teenagers, and it's evolved from, raising kids in this intentional, conscious way where people see my girls, this, they know self-talk, they know who they are, they know how to speak it into existence. We talk so much about that. I mean, we go deep, RJ, but will you explain how important the thinking and how you describe the I am and the EMI and all that?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So what we are at our core is a divine intelligence. And that divine intelligence is really our level of love and wisdom, whose subsets are our talents and abilities. Now, that is what all of us actually are. And by the way, it's complete variance. No two souls have the same amount or quality of this sentience or this divine intelligence. Now, that is the God within us all. And we are a miniaturized, when we say made in God's image, this is what we're about to explore, and I'm going to explain. We are a drop, a cell, an atom, however you want to say, of God. We have the exact same attributes of God. Forget about looking like this. This is the humanistic misinterpretation that God is some dude wearing a robe with white hair. Okay. We don't look like that either. This is a suit. We have no name, no image, and no form. And we're wearing a biological garment to explore the lower frequencies of the physical universe, just like you would put on a spacesuit. This is a biological spacesuit for our consciousness to explore this realm. Make no mistake about that. Okay, so what we are is the I am, which is God itself. That is our love and wisdom, and it's our talents and abilities. Now, that divine intelligence, that sentience, that I am, is given energy, including this is a body of energy, is given energy to create with, just like God, right? So this energy that we use our energy to think, to emote, to animate our body, and then therefore to have the body have experiences. It takes energy even to incarnate. Now, that is what it means to be made in God's image. Sentience given energy to endlessly create. And we do the same thing. We endlessly create. The issue arises, from my perspective, the issue arises when we incarnate into the lower frequencies of the physical universe, because we are so disconnected from our natural environment, from where we come from, the holistic nature, the oneness of everything. We come all the way down here with total amnesia because of the complete disconnection. Now, the issue becomes that we start identifying ourselves with what we create. So what that means is we lose ourselves in the incarnation. We start thinking that this is what we are. No, we're inside this. We created an incarnation, and this is the suit that we wear. So we start identifying with the body. We see ourselves as a physical being. Now, as soon as we identify with the body, Ashley, we're going to identify with what the body produces: thoughts, emotions, actions, behaviors, physical sensations, traumatic experiences. Now, as we start to identify with this and then all those other things, by the way, none of which is what we are.
Right.
None of that is what we are. So this is the creation of the false human character, what I call the ego mind identity. Now, that is subject to all societal conditioning, brainwashing, everything that goes on, beliefs, ideologies, concepts, roles. So we're this perfect, whole, complete divine being that has completely and utterly misidentified itself with a physical vehicle and then all these other things that are floating around here. Our disharmony, our dis-ease, our suffering all comes from the misidentification with all of those things. So healing, as well as self-realization, for me, is the returning to what we really are: the I am, the sentience, the pure awareness. And just as the painter is not the painting, we are not what we create. It is our misidentifications with what we create is what takes us astray. It leads us further and further from our true self, from what we really are. And as we get further and further away from what we really are, we are misprogramming our mind with all these things. And then the body has to have the tangible experience of that. All disharmony comes from disharmonious thought patterns. Now, we can only think in terms of what we've identified ourselves with: a belief, a thought, an experience, an ideology, a role. Now, once we detach from these things and remain as what we truly are, thinking actually just stops. And now we have meditation. Now the true self is online. Now, once the true self is online, healing starts to take place. And the longer that we can normalize the state of being present, the closer and closer we get to self-realization or enlightenment. Self-realization or enlightenment is simply the normalization of what you truly are. And then you have full communion with your higher self, as we are an aspect of our higher self. And that's what enlightenment actually is. But the story that we're telling ourselves, the spell that we are putting over ourselves, that we then put over others, that is what we must become acutely aware of that, and we must cease with doing that. And once we cease with doing that, we'll start to feel like ourselves, and then we'll realize that what we actually are is capable of anything, including putting a completely destroyed body back together or having authentic self-realization or enlightenment.
Right. When you when you were laying in that bed in the hospital for those 100 days, you were self-teaching and self-healing yourself by just whatever it was coming through you that day. I mean, you wrote a book on it after, but you were going with whatever came to you. What were you focused on every day as you were going through this?
That's a great question. Okay. Let me start by saying that I was incredibly sick, but my main goal was to walk. Right, I was quote unquote permanently paralyzed from the chest down. So, and my hospital room was right by the window, and I used to watch all the doctors and nurses and everyone walk right past me holding their Starbucks. There was nothing I wanted more than to just be able to walk. Okay, and I knew I would do it. So I feel, from my perspective and what it is that I teach and share, it starts with desire and intention, and the unification of desire and intention with the self, even in the relaxed state. So a desire is like a wish. Okay, I wanted to walk, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Intention is the harnessing of your energy, which is your will. Merging desire and intention with the self, it becomes one thing, total unification, even in the relaxed state. So now what this means, and this relates to manifestation on a very high level, right. What this now means is that without a doingness, and we'll get to that, without the doing, what you're emanating, physical reality will start to match up to that. And physical reality is part of this body. So your body must, as does the universe, it must match whatever frequency that you're emanating. So when we unify desire, intention, and self in the relaxed state, that is a perpetual emanation. So the first thing that I did was I unified my desire and intention with the self in the relaxed state of that walking is inevitable. Walking is inevitable. I'm going to keep emanating that frequency. Okay. So that's number one. And anyone can use what I just said for any achievement that they like, whether it's their health, finances, a friendship, a romance, it doesn't matter. The metaphysics work the same for everything. Now, once you have that, which is how I started, mm-hmm. and then I found myself, which are the 7 steps in the book, the Ascended Frequency Healing Technique. Actually, I found myself doing these 7 things over and over and over again, and that made up the healing technique and channeling intelligent energy, harnessing the 4 directions of consciousness, all the different things that are in the healing technique. Now, one of the keys to this, to everyone who wants to manifest anything, heal themselves, create anything, reach self-realization, you can never, ever, ever throw doubt onto the fire of your intention, because it'll put it out. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I say that doubt is death. Now, what that looks like metaphysically, if you have the intention to go in this direction, and then all of a sudden you doubt that you're going to get there, and you start thinking, well, what if I end up over here? Now your energy, it's like a train has now switched tracks.
Mhm.
Now your energy, your intention is now going over here, even though you want to go over here. But, oh, I'm not sure if I'm going to get there. What if this happens? Now your energy, this is how we create parallel realities. Now
Right.
your energy is going in the opposite direction. So we must kill doubt. Now, in order to kill doubt, you must always be present. Now, if you're always present, the finite, rational, doubting mind never gets active.
Hmm.
It never, ever, ever gets active. Now, when we master that, because I talk about, I never had one single thought that I wouldn't walk. Not one, and I mean it, not one single thought. Now, when we start to work with ourselves this way, Ashley, every single human being will be able to achieve every single thing that they desire when they work with themselves properly. And those are the keys: desire, intention, self in the relaxed state. Then everything that you do from that moment on is always in full communion with your desire and intention, which means the only end result that you can have is the fulfillment of your desire and intention, because you never break it through doubting.
Right. Wow. When you were talking about parallel lives, when you were saying in this one interview, I was listening to you explain it like you chose to move to Arkansas, and it was you were going between, let's say, New York and Arkansas, and you were making this choice. Well, a choice for RJ to be in Arkansas is there, and there's also another reality where RJ's in New York. Will you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. Okay. So this is where we get the idea that the universe is mental. We've probably heard that. That's not accurate. It's not accurate. It's a step in the right direction, but it's not accurate. It makes it, I'll explain that in a second. Okay. We have intention. We can say the universe is conscious because it's God. It's conscious, but it's not mental. That's something else. Okay. So if there's potentiality for evolution to take place, because it's all God and it is all conscious, God is obsessed with its own evolution, with the efficacy of its own evolution. If humanity did not know that, God is obsessed with the efficacy of its own evolution, as we are. We do everything so we can evolve, right? Okay. So when there's two choices, as you said, Arkansas, New York, right? Okay. If there are two choices, that means there's energy has been presented. There's energy behind both of those things, which also means that they're both going to come to fruition, because there's a possibility of the evolution of consciousness from both choices coming to fruition. Now, consciously, in our normal waking state, we cannot experience both those realities at the same time. So we make a choice to go to Arkansas, and then our conscious mind assumes that I did not make the choice to New York. But because there is energy behind both choices, they both come to fruition. That is what's called a parallel reality. So there is a version of RJ that's in New York. There's a version of RJ that's probably still in California. There's a version, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because existence is conscious, it takes advantage of every single opportunity for it to evolve itself. And so that's why parallel conditions are created. That's why, if it's possible, it already exists. Because everything is evolving and it never stops evolving. Our limited mind was not designed to experience multiple realities at the same time. It was never designed for that. But we can experience parallel conditions through a higher state of consciousness and through detachment from the egoic mind. And therefore we lose the concept, and it's just a concept, of logic and linearity. And we can begin to experience the totality of things as they're occurring simultaneously within one single now.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I want to go into it goes by so fast. I want to talk about dimensions and frequency. And I think, people are always talking about three-dimensional, 5D, 6D, all that, and how it's a frequency, and like we kind of say it it's not in the right way. Like you say, if we're in frequencies, we explain how they differ and how we go up and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked that. Okay. So I think part of why, and I don't think I've ever really talked about it in this way, so I'm going to now. I think part of why we are not experiencing the things that I sometimes talk about with great clarity, it's because we're using the wrong language. we're using the wrong language. And so, like I said, we're spelling ourselves. So when we talk about that we're in the third dimension, okay, from my direct experience, that's not accurate. It's not accurate at all. Okay. Energy is in frequency. Energy exists frequentially. And there's a new word, right? Energy exists frequentially. Okay. Dimensions house frequencies. We exist within the third frequency of the first full dimension. Now, the bottom three frequencies, because the energies are so dense and so slow, in order to support quote unquote life, they have to band together to form one thing, one reality, which gives us height, weight, and width. But it's one thing. Now we misunderstand that and call that we're in the third dimension. We don't exist dimensionally. We exist energetically, and energy exists in frequency. And frequency is an assignation of energy. So it's an assignment of energy in terms of what bandwidths it's going to exist within. We exist, you and I right now, we exist within the first three frequencies, which band together to form one thing. So as we ascend the frequencies, we'll be going into the fourth frequency and then the fifth frequency. And the first full dimension houses the first 12 frequencies. And the first full dimension is all physical reality. All physical reality is within the first dimension, the first 12 frequencies. And once you pierce the membrane, and that's kind of what it feels like, once you pop and pierce the membrane outside of the first full dimension into the second dimension, from a human perspective, there's no such thing as physicality. There's no such thing as tangibility. Everything becomes highly, highly ephemeral. Mm-hmm. So when we say fifth dimension, it's inaccurate. And I think when we start to work with ourselves more accurately, which is why we're talking about this and why I think it's such a great question, we have to start to understand that we're working with frequency and energy. Forget dimension. Dimension houses it. So if we can start to fine tune our consciousness in terms of where we're at, I think we're going to be able to maneuver better, and we're going to be able to work with our energy better if we have a direct and correct association and understanding of how the metaphysics actually work. So we're in the third frequency, the bottom three band together to form one thing, and dimensions house frequencies, and all of us are on our way to ascending into what would be the fourth full frequency.
And do we have to come back here to Earth to keep ascending? If I died in a year from now and I was at the sixth frequency, do I come back? Do I keep coming back to get to the 12th?
You get to start fresh every time the incarnation ends. Okay. Think of a rubber band ball. Okay. All those rubber bands, right? Okay. Uh-huh. Think of those rubber bands, each one as a timeline. Okay. They're all in the same space, mm-hmm. right? But they're all banded together. They're all touching, intermingling, and influencing one another. Okay. But all in the same space. All right. Now, when we leave our body, and let's say I don't mean just through meditation. Let's say we leave our body because the incarnation, we've terminated our incarnation. So we leave our body as an image. It's not entirely accurate, but it's something for the mind to work with. Mm-hmm. We leave that rubber band ball.
Okay.
Okay. Now we're in our natural, we're beyond space-time now. The rubber band ball is space-time. Okay. We're now beyond space-time. We're quote unquote outside of space-time. Now, based upon the next incarnation, we will pick and choose which one of those rubber bands and at which frequency and other things that we want to incarnate into. So you start over, so to speak. When your incarnation is over, Ashley, you could, from a linear perspective, which is not how things really work, mm-hmm. you could reincarnate into the fifth century.
Okay.
Even though in our mind that's over.
Right.
No, it's not. It's all happening right now.
Right.
It's all happening right now. So we don't, which the finite mind can't handle that. And by the way, it's not supposed to.
Right.
The higher mind's got no problem with it. But the finite mind's like, what? That's not possible. Or, oh, it sure is. Okay. Just like when you have your radio on, mm-hmm. you can only listen to one song at a time. How many songs are playing right now? thousands.
Right.
How many can you listen to and experience at a time?
Right. One.
It's the same with frequencies and realities. It works the exact same way. They're all happening right now. Now we can tune into anything that we want, even while we're incarnate here. You have to lose your mind, but you can tune into anything that you want by changing the electromagnetic frequency of your brain through meditation. And you can tap into all these different things that are occurring right now, which is something that I've been doing as a kid. So
Right.
when you're done with this incarnation, you can come back to prior from a linear perspective, the 5th century or or whatever, or from here, you could reincarnate into the 38th century, and you can reincarnate into any frequency that you wish within the first full dimension, because incarnations don't really occur outside of the first full dimension. It's not really an incarnation because
Right.
there's really is no, it's all one. So there is no separateness, and we wouldn't view it as an incarnation. But in the lower frequencies of the first full dimension, it would be a full-on incarnation like we're having. But the whole thing is up to you. The whole thing is up to you. The rules that we have placed upon ourselves do
Mhm.
not apply at all to the real self. And when we're disincarnate, the real self is online, and therefore there are no rules. You can come back as whatever you want, whenever you want, in any timeline and in any frequency, as long as you have a worthy life plan, because you need a worthy life plan in order to be able to commandeer a physical vehicle.
What about the ascended masters then, like Babaji, Jesus? I was listening to you talk about Babaji in the 12th. He's in the 12th dimension. He's the most enlightened, and he comes back whenever he's needed. That was really fascinating to me.
Yeah, the ascended masters are fascinating. We could think of them as wild cards. We could think of them as the true teachers of humanity, timeless teachers of humanity, because they are. They don't evolve through the evolutionary cycle. They were created as a finished product. So they are inserted. It's like putting jokers and jokers into the deck.
Right. Okay.
Okay. They are here, and they continue to reincarnate over and over and over again. And they do miraculous things. You normally know them by their deeds, right? Okay.
Right.
So they are here to simply continually move humanity forward in its own evolution of consciousness. And there's only 13 original ascended masters. There's only 13. Now, in terms of what I call old school original ascended masters, there's probably now somewhere between 30 and 40 total masters, what I would call total masters that have mastered themselves. But the 13 are the original ones. And we talk about Buddha, Yogananda, Babaji, Saint Germain, El Moria. There's others. And in my self-mastery course, I list them all. And I talk about some of their various incarnations as well. But they are the timeless teachers of humanity, and they keep showing up whenever they're needed. And each one of them has a very specific skill set. So as an example, the being known as Christ, which is actually Master Sananda, but the being known as Christ has mastered purity, the master of purity. Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda, is the master of love. Buddha, the being known as Buddha, is the master of wisdom. Saint Germain, who's had incarnations as Moses and Merlin and Joseph, the father of Christ, and Francis Bacon and Plato, and among others. That being is the master of energy, the master of alchemy, understands energy like no one else. So depending upon where humanity is at in its own evolutionary cycle, those masters will insert themselves of their own free will insert themselves to make sure it's like adding the perfect spice to your stew. It's like the stew is cooking, it's coming along well, but it's just missing something, just missing this little something, and it'll be perfect. Well, the ascended masters are the missing ingredient, and they're always projecting themselves into physical reality to make sure that consciousness is evolving with the greatest efficacy possible. And so that's and they also represent a physical embodiment of something for humanity to shoot for. They represent the fulfillment of themselves, and therefore they are inspirational. They give themselves incredible challenges during their incarnations, and they overcome them. And so therefore they represent an embodiment of the transcendence of physical reality and the lower consciousness. And by them being here, there's such a high vibration that a rising tide lifts all ships. They raise the frequency of humanity just by being here. And then of course they provide these teachings that only they can provide. And depending upon where humanity is at, that will be the ascended master. Or they often work, like, I'll be more specific. There are 5 ascended masters incarnate right now. 3 of them have not woken up yet. 2 of them are well aware of who they are, and they're operating at that level. And the people that know them or study their works or work with them are well aware that that's an ascended master. So there are 2 of them that are incarnate right now that are doing the highest level work, and the other 3 have not woken up, and they'll begin to wake up as the first 2 are wrapping up their incarnations.
How do you know that?
How do I know that? I don't know. I'm just able to understand these things at the highest levels, I guess.
Wow. We have 4 minutes left, and I wanted to ask you as an ending question. You talked about 2023 being a huge year.
Yeah.
Could you go like on a summary of version of that?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So 23, from an occult perspective, and occult, the origin of occult is ocular or oculist. All occults, and this whole world is occult, whether people realize it or not. It's the truth. The origin of all occult information comes from the oculists, or those who can see. And that's where we get, and that's why it's called what is hidden. The occult is what is hidden. Well, it's hidden to the 5 senses and the intellect. It is not hidden to those that can see, the ascended masters. And there's 2 ascended masters that have provided essentially all the occult information that this world has used for hundreds of thousands of years, which I think is quite interesting. 2023 or 23, from an occult perspective, 2 relates to mind body, and 3 relates to mind body spirit. 23 has to do with transcending a physical mortality, or reaching immortality, or communion with the I am and the trifecta of what we really are. So 23 is a massive, massive year in terms of people having to make a choice. They're either going to choose mind body and grounding themselves in the physical and keeping themselves locked within the 3rd frequency, or they're going to choose 3, which is mind body spirit, which is the ascending of the frequencies and working with ourselves in a much more holistic fashion. And that's the whole reason why I'm here, is to make sure that these teachings far outlive my physical body, because these are the teachings that humanity is going to use for the next 300 years as it starts to evolve its consciousness so it can ascend the frequencies. And 2023 is the most pivotal year in the history of humanity, because each individual is either going to choose their own ascension, or they're going to choose to not ascend and go nowhere and lock themselves within the suffering of physical reality.
Wow, I love that. Thank you. Thank you, RJ. I mean, I would love to do part 2s because there's so many more things that I would love to ask you. But can you give your website, how to find you and all that?
Sure. Yeah. The website is ascend the frequency. Excuse me. ascendthefrequencies.com. I suggest people subscribe to the YouTube channel because I give a lot of information. I've probably done 100 hours of free material, free videos on my YouTube channel. Instagram, there are daily quotes and clips of me. So it's worth it. And I also make announcements on there as well. And what we're doing right now is we're finalizing the rest of my 2023 schedule. and my entire 2024 schedule, all the different courses and classes that I'm going to be teaching. So that will be released soon. So if anyone is interested in what it is that I teach and they want to partake, sign up for the newsletter on the website, and pretty soon it'll be posted and you can join the wait list, because the classes, they get sold out rather quickly. So you can join the wait list and you'll be able to see a full preview of everything that's going to be going on the rest of this year and in 2024.
Thank you. Oh, I've enjoyed it so much, RJ. Thank you. I'm so grateful for you, and I'm so just knowing that our paths have crossed is just a blessing to me. So thank you.
You're most welcome, sweetheart. You're most welcome. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you.